I stood in the foyer for what felt like a really, really long time. The house had taken on this silence. It was like I'd gone deaf in both ears at some point between now and the departure of Neil. What the fuck now? What the hell was I supposed to do now? Well, I'm gonna leave. Fuck it. I mean, I'm no hero. Even if I was able to find Neil, what am I gonna be able to do to save him? I have a gun, I have no idea how to shoot, and at the same time, I have no idea what the hell I'm even shooting at. I reached for the cell phone in my pocket and unlocked it. I dialed 911. 911, what's the state and location of your emergency? I have no idea where I am. I need the police. Something has happened. My friend took me to this house and now he's gone. I don't know where he is. Send someone. I could feel the panic begin to rise in my throat like hot lava. I could hardly hold the phone anymore. The lights in the house zinged to life for a moment. A surge of rolling light started from the back of the hallway to the foyer. It was the first time I had seen the house lit up. 911. What's the location of your emergency, please? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? I need help. The call immediately dropped. No signal. It fucking figures. I turned to the door and grabbed the handle. The door opened easily. In my mind, I had anticipated being locked in that house with whatever it was in the lurking darkness, and my body being found at some point in time. The cool air was refreshing on my face. A light, misty rain was falling from the sky, making my skin slippery. I ran to the car and tried the handle. This time the door was locked. Running to the other side just to make sure, I tried the handle. Locked also. I was going to break the window. I searched the ground for something big enough to take out the glass with, and a thought occurred to me. What was I going to do? Break the window and sit in the car? I didn't have the keys. Neil did. If I broke the window, I wouldn't have any more protection in there than I did out here. The window would be broken. I began to cry. I was at a loss. I had no idea what the hell else to do. Laura. I stopped. The crying, the sniffling, the movement, the blinking, my whole body stopped. Laura. Every single hair on my body was standing on end. Someone was calling my name from the doorway of the house. I slowly turned to face the house. The inky darkness was all I could see from the wide-open doorway. I couldn't make out the foyer inside at all. It was completely black. The sky opened up and the rain started to fall. I slid down the side of the car and knelt in the puddles of wet dirt that began to form on the ground. As quiet as I could, I inched my way around the back of the car. I set my bag down and rummaged through it, searching for something, anything. I hadn't cleaned my purse out in months, and there had to be something I could use. Turning the bag over and the contents spilling on the ground, a flash of light lit up the floor and instantly went out. What was that? I ran my hands across the contents and suddenly the ground lit up again, a bright white light, and then out again. There it was. I held up a little green neon light in my hands. The flashlight keychain I had won from a machine outside a really terrible Mexican restaurant I went to a few weeks back. I squeezed it in my hand and I looked back at the house. The rain was really coming down now, and I didn't hear anything else. I stood up slowly. I was going to make a run for it. I kept my eyes on the front of the house and walked backwards slowly. I was going to keep my eye on it for as long as I could. Before long, I'd lost all visibility of the house. The rain came down in sheets. I swung around and took off as fast as my legs would carry me when I ran smack into a tree. I searched frantically for my little flashlight. I dropped it somewhere and I couldn't find it. I grabbed my cell phone and turned it on. What little light it provided, I was able to find the tiny flashlight right next to me, and I flicked it to life when I got to my knees. There, in the beam of my flashlight, were 2 muddy feet. The feet were torn to shreds like someone who had been running on glass. I froze. It wasn't a tree I ran into, it was someone. "Laura!" Neil screamed from the direction of the house. Instinctively, I spun around to search for Neil. Turning back to the figure, it was nowhere to be found. I shined my light frantically, looking for where it had gone. It had vanished. I got to my feet and held my light forward, the beam cutting through the darkness. "Laura," Neil said from behind me. I turned to face him, almost ecstatic he was back. "Oh, Jesus Christ, Neil, where the fuck were..." Eye to eye, nose to nose, there in the rain, I was staring into a face that had been battered and beaten. Scars and scrapes covered the cheeks, and the lips and the eyes were wide and stared right into mine. Tiny blood vessels in the whites of the eyes had been broken, which almost made the original blue color seem a hazy pink. The mouth twisted back into a rotten sneer, a smile that exposed an unnatural amount of teeth. "Laura," the being said, in Neil's voice. I turned and ran. I tore through the field and through the long grass, scratching my face and tearing at my clothes. I ran. I clambered and jumped over invisible obstacles and ran as fast as I could, away from the worst thing I had ever seen in my life. I had no idea where I was going, and the rain and the grass completely obscured my view. Then, from in the distance, I saw a faint light. The light was like a little fireball in my heart. It energized me, and I burst into a sprint. The energy that ran through my body was so intense, it was almost unnatural. The field gave way to cleared land, and I fell on all fours and gasped for air. I looked up to see my finish line. There in the dark was the house. And sitting in the horseshoe driveway was Neil's car. And behind it, my emptied purse. "No," I cried. "No!" "Laura!" The soft hiss of my name was heard reverberating from the grass behind me. I bolted for the front door, and I shut and bolted it behind me. I immediately looked out of the long window next to that door, and I saw her. I could tell immediately she wasn't touching the ground where she was. She was about half a foot off of the ground, suspended in air right by the field where I came out of. She didn't move, she just floated there, the sneer across her face and her eyes wide in an insane glare. "Neil!" I hissed as I picked up the gun and headed to the back of the house where I saw him last run. The light surged and the hallway lit up on all sides. There, at the end of the hallway, was a door, cracked open. A glow illuminated from the crack. "Neil!" I cocked the hammer of the gun and I held it out in front of my face. I didn't know how to shoot it or even how to hold it, but I was prepared to pull the trigger for anything that tried to attack me. I opened the door with a creak, and there, on the bed, was a woman. The room lit in candlelight. I could definitely tell it was a woman. She turned her head and looked at me, her eyes filled with fear. She screamed through the duct tape that was over her mouth, her hands bound to one another and to the bedposts, her nightgown bloody and torn around her midsection. I ran to her and pulled the tape off as fast and as softly as I could. She winced in pain. As soon as I removed the tape, I got a good look at her and I backed away. It was her. The woman outside, the one that was floating in the fucking yard. "You have to get out of here. You have to leave right now. You have to go right now," she said. I turned and opened the door back to the hallway. I didn't need to be told twice. As I stated before, I am no hero. I ran into the hallway, and there, crouched against the wall, was Neil, bloody and scratched. I ran to him and pulled him to his feet. "Neil, what the hell happened to you? Come on, we need to go now." Neil put his arm around me and limped along as I pulled him to the door. "Where is she?" he asked. "Is she out? Did she get free?" "I'm gonna fuck her, shoot her in the head. We're going right now, Neil. I'm gonna shoot her. If she gets anywhere near us, I'm gonna shoot her." Neil stopped in his tracks. "Is she free?" he asked again. "Yes! We need to get the fuck out of here!" Neil began to sob. He hung his head and sobbed. "Neil, please. We need to go right now and find the police. We need to come back with the police and get the woman that's tied up in the back room." Neil grabbed my arm and flung it away from him. His sobs became something else. His sobs started to resemble laughter. I stepped back and pointed the gun right at him. "Neil?" He began to laugh harder now. His head still hung low. His hearty laugh echoed through the darkness of the house. He slowly began to stand up straight. With his arms open and his head held back, the light surged to life. There, on his chest and his hands, were symbols carved into the flesh. His blood streamed down the front of his shirt and pants like a fountain. "It worked," he said breathlessly. "It worked!" "What the hell is going on? Tell me what is happening, Neil, before I fucking shoot you," I said. He stared at me intently. "I've been working on this for months. I've been trying to summon her for months, and she never came. I've bled my wife almost to death trying to get her blood for rituals, and she never came. She's here now. Finally, she's here." After my wife came home from the fortune teller, she would speak to me as somebody else. That someone else told me that they were a djinn and needed to be free from within her body. Her body was dying from an undiagnosed cancer. The djinn needed a new body to live in. That way, we could be together. She would give me power, unlike anyone had ever seen. That's why I brought you here. You are her new body, Laura. That fortune teller sent me her, Laura. It's the single best thing that has ever happened to me, and now she's here. Out of the corner of my eye in the distance were lights, unmistakable red and blue flashing lights coming up the road. The police! They must have traced my signal of my location and found me. I slowly backed up to the door, gun pointed at Neil. The lights came back to life. The dim foyer was enough for me to see the figure step out from the shadows. She moved in a fluid motion towards me, her toes scraping the wooden floor as she hovered above it. "Open the door, this is the police." I held the gun to Neil as the figure continued to me. I held that gun high. Neil stared at me intently, and a sneer slowly crawled across his face. He took a quick step and I fired. Someone definitely call it a lucky shot. The pinhole between his eyes was all I saw before the explosion of red liquid shot from the back of his skull. The figure was nowhere to be seen. In a heap, Neil fell to the ground and lay there convulsing as the last of his life left him. I dropped the gun and pulled the door open to guns drawn pointed in my direction. It was over. I made it out alive. Sitting in the back of that police car, I watched as the paramedics carried Neil's wife out of the house on the stretcher. She was covered and tightly bandaged. One of the technicians carried a bag IV fluid as they followed her into the ambulance. The doors closed, and with a wail it took off down the road. Just then, the front door opened of the police cruiser, and the policeman got in and fastened his belt. I caught his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Well, you're quite the hero, you know that?" He smiled. He put the cruiser in drive and began to drive away when there was a knock at his window. The female police officer had my bag in her hands and handed it to the officer. He thanked her and rolled the window back up. I looked up at her and thanked her with a smile of my own, and she smiled back. Her mouth twisted back into a rotten sneer. A smile that exposed an unnatural amount of teeth.